Your hiring practices suck. And I know they do because you always complain about not being able to find good people. Well, on this episode of The Root of All Success, I will be taking you through a time-tested, proven methodology called the 10 steps to hire new team members that's going to show you how to find, hire, onboard, train, and retain the best talent for your company. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Root of All Success with the Real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of The Root of All Success, the Real Jason Duncan. The Real Jason Duncan.
Hiring is tough. And in today's show, what I'm going to be talking about is a methodology that's been proven over the last decade to find, hire, onboard, train, and retain the best talent for my companies and for my clients' companies. I'll give you a quick success story. A client of mine that I work with one-on-one came to me last year and was needing some help with his business. He was working too much, wanted to figure out how to exit without exiting. He didn't want to sell. He just needed to figure out how to manage daily operations in a way that didn't steal all his time. And we started working on that process. Well, he had complete employee turnover in his entire company within about 6 weeks. It was an anomaly, and it was as bad as it sounds. But because of that, he got to implement what I'm about to teach you today, and it has completely changed the future of his company. He just told me not too long ago, he said, Jason, I have the best team I've ever had in the entire time I've been in business. And he credits primarily the fact that he used this methodology. So this methodology that I'm going to give you today is called the 10 steps to hire new team members. Now, I'm going to tell you that there's a free resource that I'm going to give you at the end of this video, at the end of this listening to this podcast, wherever you're listening to it or watching it, whatever it is, you're going to get access to a free resource at the end. You just have to listen all the way through. And then once you get to the end and you hear this free resource, you can go download this free resource. It's yours to keep. And then you can come back and listen to the show and you can, or this episode, or watch this video again, and you can go through the resource with me talking through all the points. Are you ready to dive in? Well, let's do it. So one of the things I've noticed as an entrepreneur myself and as a business coach working with entrepreneurs is that most of them complain at some point about people. Hard to find good people. Can't keep good people. I don't know where to find them. I don't know how to interview them. I don't know how to onboard them. Well, what I did is I had the same problems as an entrepreneur that you did. I'm no different than you. The difference is I started deeply studying the methodologies that my peers were using. And I was pulling out the things that I saw that they were doing that worked. I was pointing out the things that didn't work and stopped doing those. And then realized that what I had discovered is that I'd found that there's 10 things that if I do in pretty much in this order every time, not perfect, but almost without fail, I end up finding, hiring, and bringing on the right person. Now, that doesn't mean that there's going to be people that quit or you have to fire every once in a while. But the reality is, if you follow the mantra, hire slow, fire fast, what you're going to find using this methodology will help you do that. So here are the 10 steps. I'm going to give them really quickly just as a highlight so you know what's coming. And then I'm going to go through each of these 10 steps a little at a time to show you exactly what each of these steps mean. Step number 1 is write an ad. Step number 2 is create an application form. Step number 3 is post your ad. Step 4 is review the applications. Step 5, conduct phone calls. Step 6, conduct in-person interviews. Step 7, conduct a culture check. Step 8, make the offer. Step 9, sign the employment agreement. And step 10, welcome and onboard your new team member. Those are the 10 steps. It's not rocket science. And you probably think, Jason, I'm doing all those things now. Well, I'm telling you, you're probably not doing them the way that I'm about to teach. So stay tuned. Let's dig in. Step number one is write an ad. Now, I want you to put yourself in the position of someone looking for a job in today's market. So you hop on Indeed, you hop on LinkedIn, you hop on Monster or some other job posting site, and you start looking at jobs and you read those descriptions. And it probably might not even be a bad exercise for you as the entrepreneur, as the owner of the business, is to go and act like you're looking for a job for a couple of days and go through that process and see what you see. And here's what you're going to experience. Every single job post sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher. That's what they sound like because they're all written down by ChatGPT, which has, we can all tell, but they just sound all the same. We offer competitive salary and benefits for the right candidate who wants to come and join a growing team. Bull. You fill in the words, right? That is not who you are. That might be true, but it is not who you are. So what does step one mean? Well, write an ad that will connect your candidate with your personality. I had a guy work for me for almost 10 years, and he came to work for me, and I was running a very small company at the time, and he had come from an international multi-billion-dollar corporation. And he said, when I asked him why he decided he wanted to come work for me, or why he applied rather, he said, because when I read your ad, he said, I knew something was different about this opportunity. And up until the last day that he worked for me, he said, Jason, I remember that ad. I remember the voice in the ad. I remember, and I remember that when I met you, I knew you wrote that ad. And that's what connected him to the company. And he worked for me, like I said, for almost a decade. That's the type of longevity that if you hire correctly, you get it. So it starts with the ad. You got to make sure that your voice and your personality comes through. And I want you to think about these three things. So write these down if you're in a place where you can do it, or mark where you're listening to this show and go back and write these down later. There are three reasons why people come to work for you and why they stay working for you in this order. Number one, opportunity. Number two, recognition. And number three, money. In that order, that's why people come to work for you. So in your ad, you have to make sure that you highlight the opportunity and then highlight how they are going to be recognized or how you recognize other people for their contributions. And then show them what the money is. Now, I'm not an advocate necessarily, and I'll show you later, of promoting what you're paying in the ad itself. But there are ways that we can do that, which I'll show you in a minute. So step one, write an ad. And it better be different than every other ad that's out there that your applicant's looking at. Step number two is set up an application form. And I am a huge proponent of this because I don't think resumes in general are very helpful with us looking as entrepreneurs, looking at people to come to work. They're necessary so that you can kind of get a benchmark of where they live, where they work, where they went to school, et cetera. But really, that's not the most important thing. So what I advise is to set up an application form. And I use Google Forms because it's free and it goes into automatically to a Google Sheet so I can see it without having to log in anywhere. Also, you can look into Typeform or Jotform or something else, but I want an online application form that my candidate can go to. So they go to the ad, they read the ad, and when it says how to apply, it says click here to apply. Now, if you're using Indeed or one of these online platforms, they're going to want you to apply through their platform. But that doesn't mean you have to make your candidate apply through that platform. What you should do is write in very big, bold letters, this is how you apply. Click here, or go to and then set up some sort of a bit.ly or small, tiny URL to point to your application form. And that application form, as used as the device in hiring the right team members, is a way for you to screen people and get to know who they are before you waste time talking to them, either on the phone or in person. Now, the questions that I ask all the things that I might need to know. Obviously, the demographics of the person, like where do they live, blah, blah, blah. I also ask things like, hey, what type of experience do you have in this particular position? And let them type in what the experience is. Now, this form, it needs to be different if you're hiring blue collar versus white collar. You just use your best judgment. But the form should ask all the questions that you want to know about this person, including why they applied for this job, why are they leaving their last job, what do they like in their current position, what do they wish it did that they don't have now, what's the best book they've ever read, who's the leader that they admire the most, do they, on a scale of 1 to 5, rank their abilities in 3 or 4 areas depending on what job you're hiring for. And then somewhere in there it should say, hey, the salary range or the income range for this position is between X and Y. Do you understand? And they have to click yes before they can go on. That's not telling them what they're going to get paid, but it gives them a range. I'm a big believer in giving a range. So you could say this position is going to pay between $100,000 and $150,000. Do you understand? Or it's going to pay between $30,000 and $40,000. Whatever it happens to be, there's no surprises, because you don't want to go through, read a resume, read an application, have a phone call, have an in-person interview, love this person. You present them an offer and they're like, I can't pay my bills on that. There's no sense in wasting all that time. So I want you to ask the questions that you think would be really important to know. And if you want help with this, when you get this free resource that I'm going to give you at the end of this video, you're going to be able to download that free resource and then even schedule a call with me to talk about it if you want. So make sure also that your application forms are private and they're not set to be public, because that information should be yours, so that when they hit submit, it only goes to you. So that's your application form. That's step 2. Step 3 is place the ad or post the ad. Now, there's lots of places to post that. Indeed is the granddaddy of them all, as it is today in the recording of this video in 2024. LinkedIn is still out there. Craigslist. I don't think you should underplay Craigslist. Again, depending on where you live and what the job is for. I found lots of great employees through Craigslist. ZipRecruiter, Monster, still a thing. There's all these job postings. You got to think about all these platforms. You got to think about where is the person that you're trying to hire looking? Where is he or she looking? And then you need to make sure that you place it there. All right. Take into consideration, what it's going to cost, because some of these platforms can be very expensive and you don't need to pay a lot of money to place that ad. So be careful of the cost. I think, in my opinion, Indeed has come a long way. They used to be terrible. They used to be very expensive. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't get paid by Indeed. I'm not an affiliate. But of late, they've become much, much better, easier to use, and they don't charge you unless you accept an application. There's certain different ways to do it, but I like what they're doing right now. Step 4, review those applications. Now, here's what I do. Because I use Google Forms, I use Google Forms for people to apply. I actually print the entire form that they filled out. So that it comes out to 12 or 13 pages based on the way I ask the questions. So I've got 12 to 13 pages. I'll also have their resume sent in because of the process, because part of the application process is to send a resume and a cover letter. And when they send me a resume and a cover letter, I take the resume, the cover letter, and their form, staple it all together, and I have one packet of information that I can look through. Now, I will tell you, based on talking to some employment attorneys, that there are employment laws that have a lot to do with what I'm about to suggest. So I am not an attorney. You need to go get your own employment law advice on this. So if I say something that kind of cuts sideways on what you believe to be not legal, because it's not about breaking the law. It's about what you might have to keep records of. Just be very careful of this. So what I do is I actually take in most cases, I take all that form and I just make notes on the resume and make notes on the form. And I might rank them, from 1 to 10, 10 being, hey, this is the ideal candidate. 1's like, I'm not even going to call these people back. I might ask myself questions to ask them later. And I write that all in that paperwork. Now, what I was told by an employment attorney is that anything that you record like that in the process of interviewing or considering candidates is now part of a permanent record. And if there's ever a supposed wrongful termination, they can subpoena those documents. So be careful what you write and how you write it and where you put it. That's between you and your attorney and the laws of your local jurisdiction. But what I just explained to you is what I do. Now, if I'm scoring these candidates on a 1 to 10 basis, I'm not going to be overly critical. I'm also not going to be aloof. I'm going to rank them. And if an applicant scores 5 or less, I'm going to immediately send them an email letting them know that I'm not going to be proceeding. And here's an example of what I would say. Hey, thank you so much for your interest in this position with this company. We appreciate you taking the time to fill out the application form. We've chosen to proceed with another candidate who's a better fit for the opportunity, but I wish you the best of luck. Everything I said there is 100% true because I am pursuing another candidate, and it lets them off the hook. It closes a cycle for them and lets them move on. Now, if an applicant scores between 6 and 10 points, then I would either do one or two things. I'd either schedule a 15-minute phone call with them, or I would call them out of the blue to ask them some questions. Now, I'm a guy who would prefer to call them out of the blue, depending upon the nature of the job that they're trying to fulfill, because I want to see what they're like on a phone without being prepared. So if they say, hey, or if you call them up and they go like, they answer the phone, what? Or they don't answer the phone, or they're really angry, or they're very pleasant and nice. It tells you a little bit about them because they don't know who you are and they don't know what's coming. So if they don't answer, I might even send them a text. Hey, this is Jason with blah, blah, blah. You applied for blank, blank, blah, blah, or whatever. Can you talk real quick? Now that is giving them a little bit of heads up, but at least they're not preparing for a whole day or two in advance for a phone call. And it's a 15-minute phone call. And what I say on that phone call is I say, hey, you applied for this position. I'd like to take just 10 or 15 minutes and ask you some questions and give you a chance to ask me a couple before we decide if we need to move any further. Is that okay? And without fail, every candidate has always said, yeah, that's fantastic. Now, if you are on the call and you know that this person is not good fit, then you need to let them go on that phone call. And I'm going to give you a tip on that in just a minute. But when you are talking to them before you make that decision, I think there are some critical questions you need to ask. I would say this, you said in the application form that the reason you applied for this position is X, Y, and Z. Could you tell me more about that, please? And that way they can talk a little bit more about what it is. Then I would say something along the lines of the reason we are looking for someone to fill this position is, and I would fill that in. And then I would reiterate the compensation. Hey, the compensation for this position is going to be in this range. Is that doable for you and your family? And then list a range. Now, if there's any skills or licenses or certifications or physical abilities that they need right now, you need to tell them this on the phone. So in that call, if the candidate is a match and you would like to invite them for an in-person interview, you just tell them right there and get that in-person interview scheduled before you move on. If you're sure that they're not a match, you need to say, hey, man, or lady, whatever. Hey, person. Hey, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And after hearing your answers and evaluating your potential match with the position and comparing that to the other candidates that I've talked to, I don't think it really makes sense to move forward at this time, but I wish you the best of luck. Thanks again for applying. Goodbye.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur, I know that you have to deal with sales on a regular basis. I mean, every entrepreneur does. And if you aren't paying attention to sales as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be an entrepreneur for very long. But I've got a sponsor of this show called Dubb that helps you bring the personal back to sales. If you want to figure out how to improve content creation, improve client trust, improve your sales process, decrease the sales cycle, because we all know time kills deals. If you want to increase client bookings and increase conversions, you need to take a look at Dubb. There's a special offer for Dubb for listeners to The Root of All Success at therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb, and that's DUBB. What Dubb does, I've been using this for years. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so honored that they're our primary sponsor of the podcast. But they have helped over 60,000 businesses around the world communicate better, to make sales easier, to make sales more personal. And Dubb is built for growing teams. I mean, you can set up video emails, you can set up custom onboarding, you can do admin reporting, anything you need around video and sales and automation. Dubb is there. You can try Dubb now. Your conversions to sales are waiting. All you got to do is go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. And there you're going to get 2 weeks for free to try Dubb. Plus, you're going to get 50% off your first 2 months of Dubb. You can't beat that. So go check it out. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
That, again, close the cycle. Don't leave these people hanging. Give them a way to understand where you're moving. You're moving on, and they are too. And now, if you are unsure or uncertain about that candidate, what you might want to say is something like this. And by the way, these scripts that I'm reading to you are in the free resource that I'm going to be giving you at the end of the show. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And after hearing your answers and evaluating your potential match with the position and comparing that to other candidates that I've talked to, I want to take this back to my team and I would like to discuss it. And we're going to reach back out to you via email and let you know about next steps. Okay. And then you do that. That way it gives you some time to think about it. All right. Step 6 is the in-person interview, the first in-person interview. And when they come to that interview, you need to note the time of arrival. If they are a minute late, they will always be late coming to work. You can guarantee it. If they are on time, that's great. If they're early, that's probably even better. You got to pay attention to that. Did they come dressed appropriately? Do they smell appropriately? I mean, I've had people show up smelly for interviews, and if it's a white-collar position, can't hire that person because I can't have them stinking when they go talk to my potential clients. Were they prepared? Did they bring anything with them? One of my pet peeves in interviews, when I'm interviewing people, is they show up empty-handed. They just walk in and they're like, hey, they shake my hand, they sit down across the table and they're ready to go. Well, they didn't bring a copy of their resume. They don't have a notebook. They don't have a pen. They have nothing to take notes with. The last person I hired in a significant role for any of my companies, one of the reasons I hired her as opposed to other candidates is that when she arrived, she had a bag of her stuff. She came in, she sat down, she greeted me. She was very happy to be there. She spoke warmly about what, her expectations were for the meeting. And she pulled out a notepad. She pulled out a piece of paper. She had written some questions ahead of time down on. That is the type of preparedness that I'm looking for. You need to know what you're looking for. Now, every company is going to require different things. So at this in-person interview, make sure you go over the things that you need them to know and that you need to know from them. What I recommend is just going through the standard. Hey, where did you work last? And kind of go through the form and the resume. Just do that. But then I want to give you something, and this is kind of the coolest part of this whole process that I think people really, really like. Candidates have always liked this. And that is, I use something called interview by numbers. And in interview by numbers, what we do with that is I have collected 72 questions from fellow entrepreneurs and business owners over the course of my career as an entrepreneur. And I collated them into one document, and it's actually in this free resource I'll be giving you at the end of this. And I do interview by numbers. So I tell the candidate something like this. I have already spent 15, maybe 30 minutes with them talking about the job, talking about them, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, you know what? Now we're going to move into the part of the interview where I do is called interview by numbers. I've got 72 questions that I've collected that I want to ask you. And of course, when I say 72, without fail, their eyes get wide. They're like, what's going on here? I say then, look, I'm not going to ask you all 72 questions, but you're going to pick the questions that I ask. Inevitably, they smile. They look a little bit surprised, like, well, I don't know what this means. And then I tell them, look, there's 72 questions. I give them their thing. You're going to pick a number between 1 and 72, and I'm asking that question. Some of these questions are specific about a job or at all, but not about this one, but about why are you interested in this position? What makes you qualify for this position? Those are very specific job or very specific interview questions. Then there are other questions that might be like, are you a cat or a dog person? Why? Now, those questions are not there just by somebody trying to be funny. It's to see how these people respond. But the other part of this is because they pick the question, they can't get mad at me for asking that question. Because if I just sit down in an interview and ask somebody point blank, you a dog or a cat person? Is a hot dog a sandwich? Any of these weird questions, they're going to be like, why is this idiot asking me these questions? But because it's part of this interview by numbers process, they like it. Candidates always enjoy this. Again, there's 72 questions, and I usually take the time to ask 5 or 6. And what I do is when they pick the number of whatever question is, they pick number 7. I'll say, okay, number 7, why'd you pick number 7? And then it tells me how they make decisions on the fly. They might pick 32 or 72 or number 1, and it tells me a little bit about why they pick those numbers, how they make decisions. I write the number down, and then I ask them the question, and then I make a couple of notes of how they answer the question. I do that probably 5 or 6 times through those questions. It's a very enjoyable part of the process, and I really get to understand the personality of the person I'm interviewing. It's a good thing for you to do as well. Now, at the end of that interview, what you're going to do is you're going to tell them, look, I'm going to take all this information that you shared with me under consideration. I'm going to compare this to other candidates, and I'm going to get back to you within a certain time frame. And you give them that time frame. Don't leave them hanging. Treat them the way you would want to be treated if you were working or looking for a job as well. So make sure that you do that. Now, thank them, welcome, thank them for coming in, see them out. And I tell you this, if you know very clearly without question that they're not a potential fit, you need to let them know before they leave. There's no sense in them having a false sense of hope or keeping a cycle open for them. Close it before they leave. And I've done this several times in the history of hiring people. I've hired dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And I've done this. And only twice did the person I tell they weren't a fit and thank them for coming in, and that was done. Only twice did they get a little bit offended. One guy got like royally offended. And then another guy got slightly offended. He didn't understand because we were only 30 minutes into the interview, and I told him it's not going to work. And he kind of was shocked. But then as we got ready for him to walk out and I shook his hand, wishing him the best, he turned and said, "Thank you for being honest with me." And that just, he can move on. He can go on with the rest of his day, the rest of his week, the rest of his life, and not wonder whether he's going to be getting an offer from me. Now, a bonus step right here between step 6 and 7 is a pre-employment assessment. Now, I know it's a bonus step, but I would almost require it. As a matter of fact, for my clients that I work with, I can't require them, but as close to requiring them as possible, my clients, when they're hiring people, they have to do a pre-employment assessment. I recommend salestestonline.com. It's for sales and non-sales positions in spite of the name. It's an inexpensive way to do that, but there are others. There's Culture Index, there's DISC analysis, there's Predictive Index. There's all different kinds of ways to do pre-employment, but you need to do this so that you get some different and better perspective on who the candidate is. Now, step 7, let's assume that they did great in the in-person interview. Their pre-employment assessment came back the way that you hoped it would. Now it's time to do step 7, and that is the culture interview. This is the fitness check. Fitness check. Not can they do sit-ups, but can they fit in the company? Now, this includes checking references. There are specific ways that you can do reference check calls. So I usually get a past supervisor, a past coworker, and a non-professional reference, a character reference of someone, non-family member. And I usually ask the standard questions. It typically takes 5 minutes. Can you tell me a little bit about this person? What are the greatest things you know about this person? But then I'll also say this, and this is an interesting question. What would I need to know about this person that I won't know until they've worked for me for about 6 months? And when I ask that question, people always go, that's a great question. Well, there's not really anything bad about them. And I said, look, I didn't say it had to be bad. I just said, what am I not going to know about this person until they've worked for me for 6 months? Because we all know that, right? You hire somebody and you don't really know who they are for 6 months. And then you're like, oh, they're a little bit mouthy when they get cranky, or they bring fish to the office and heat it up in the microwave. Like, what is it about this person that I need to know? Or they're absolutely spectacular with customers, even though they're not in a sales position. Whatever that is, that question seems to dig beneath the surface and really get me some reference material that'll help me. So that's part of my fitness check. But I also include a second in-person interview. And this second in-person interview is designed for them to get access to my team and let my team have access to them as part of the process. So normally what I do is I bring in my top team members or maybe some random folks throughout the office and bring them in, no more than 10 or 12 people. We sit in the conference room and I prep the candidate. Hey, you're going to meet some of the team members today. And my team, I tell them they all get to ask one question, and it doesn't have to be about business. It doesn't have to be about anything related to the job. It just can't be inappropriate. We can't ask questions that you can't ask in an employment relationship, candidate relationship situation. But they can ask any question, do one at a time. And it tells me, how's this candidate going to respond to people? How do they think on their feet? And then I let the candidate ask one or two questions of the team collectively, or if they want to pick one person out and ask a question, that's fine. That just tells me how they're going to fit in the culture of the business. Now, I don't need to, 99% of the time, I don't need to go back to my team after this meeting and say, what'd you think? I can tell it either fit or it didn't. I dismiss them about halfway through the meeting. They're all gone. Now it's just me and the candidate. And now we can get down to brass tacks. How do you feel about working here? If you were offered a position, would you take it today? What questions have not been answered that need to be answered? If I really know I'm ready to offer that job, it's time to move to step 8, and that is the job offer. The job offer needs to be formal. I get it. I'm a man of my word. If I shake your hand, tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. But I'm also a man who has a short memory span sometimes. I might forget what I committed to. It's not that I'm not committed to it. I just forgot what I said. That's why a job offer needs to be formal and in writing, as is step number 9, the employment agreement. These things need to be in writing. So imagine this. John comes in and interviews me. We go through the whole process. At the end of that second in-person interview, I know that I want to hire John because he's fit. Everything works. And I say, John, I would like to offer you the job. When could you start? And he says, that's great. It's fantastic. I can start 2 weeks from Monday. Whatever he says, you shake hands. That's not the official job offer. The official job offer needs to be emailed to him in a PDF document that includes his employment agreement, which is step 9. So step 8 is the offer. Step 9 is the employment agreement. That all needs to go out and needs to be official. It should have the employment agreements that follow your state and federal guidelines, as well as any non-disclosure, non-compete, or any other provisions or clauses for your company. You need to have the employee accept that offer and sign the employment agreement. This not only is the right thing to do to hire the right people for your business, but it also makes your business worth more money. Why? Because at some point when you get ready to sell your business, the buyer is inevitably going to ask, I need to see copies of the employment contracts for all the employees. And if you say, I don't have it, then that buyer knows that he has nothing to walk into that assures him that he has a contract with any of his employees. You need to make sure that there's an employment agreement, a contract between you and that employee, that they work for you for this amount of money, they do this job, here's what they're supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. That has to happen. Those are steps 8 and 9. So finally, what's step 10? Step 10 is welcome and onboarding. Step 10 is that first impression, day one, that employee is going to have, that new employee, of how your company runs. And how you set those expectations on day one is what they're going to expect on day 81, day 881, and day 1081. They're going to expect whatever you set up that first day. So here's what it often looks like. New employee comes in, you're like, hey, we're really glad you're here. Once you sit in the conference room, I'll be back. Let me go get some paperwork and we'll get, what is that? The I-9? Okay. I got to get the I-9. I got to get your W-2 filled out. And okay. I'll get all that. I'll be back. That all should be set up. So when he or she comes in the office, glad you're here. Here's the schedule of what we're going to be doing this week in your training and onboarding week. So at 9:00 this morning, we're going to meet in the conference room. You're going to have a meeting with all the department directors so they know who you are, you know who they are. Then at 10 o'clock, you're going to meet with HR. You're going to fill out all your paperwork. Then at 11 o'clock, you're going to meet with IT, and you're going to get all your IT, and you're going to get your computer issued, your phone issued, whatever that happens to be. Maybe it's a company car, whatever that happens to be. All that stuff needs to happen day one, or as close to day one as possible. And then at the end of that day, you need to go see them and say, listen, I'm so glad that you're here. We're all glad you're here. Thank you for being here. We can't wait to see where this goes. Now, you have that type of day one or week one with a new employee. Well, you tell me, are they locked in? Are they going to be there? Do they now understand what your expectations are? For sure. As opposed to they come in and it's completely haphazard. Everybody's running around with their hair on fire. They're going to think that that's normal. And if they think that's normal, then that's how they're going to act. They're going to rise to the level that you set in that dynamic that first day, first week. I could tell you that one of my clients hired a new executive assistant. He had never had one before. And I told him this little spiel that I gave you in step 10 here is that welcome and onboarding that first week is so critical, because if she's going to be your assistant and you don't have anything scheduled for that first week for her to do, she's going to think that scheduling things isn't really that important to you. But because he went through and scheduled an entire week with his assistant and he trained her in that first week on everything that was expected, now that she's been there months, guess what she believes is Guess what she believes is important, and guess what she believes or acts out every day? Schedules. She schedules things. She knows that her boss expects things to be done a certain way, and she appreciated it. So treat that new employee as they're highly desired and they're ready and glad that you're ready and glad that they're there. Make sure you do that. So to recap the 10 steps to hire new team members, number one, you got to write that ad. That ad's got to have your voice and your personality in it. It cannot sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. Number two, create an application form so you can gather data ahead of time to help you make decisions before you even meet this person. Number three, post the ad in the appropriate place where your candidates are living and working and looking for new work. Number four, review those applications, make notes, of course, follow the appropriate guidelines and make sure you don't do anything outside of employment law. Number five, conduct an in-person phone call. I like to do those unscheduled, but however you want to do it, do those first. Don't invite somebody in cold for an interview because you might not need to waste the time. Do a phone call and you'll know what you need to know. Number six, conduct that in-person interview. Make sure that you give them the opportunity to ask you questions as much as you ask them questions. Remember, it's an interview both ways. They're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Give them that opportunity. And I love the interview by numbers concept. Number seven, conduct a culture check. Make sure that they fit within your business. Make sure you give them the opportunity to interact and see what it's like, because you could have a great person who has all the skills in the world, but they are they stick out like a sore thumb in the whole business and your whole company, and it's going to drag everybody down. Don't do that. Number eight, make the offer. Number nine, get them to sign the employment agreement. And number 10, welcome and onboard your new team member. I'm the Real Jason Duncan, and I promise you that if you do these things, you will have better quality people wanting to work with you, staying with you for a long time. Now, would you like a copy of a PDF document that's 15 pages long that goes into everything that I just said, including those 72 questions? Then I want to give this to you for free. Here's how you're going to get it. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/hiring, HIRING, hiring. therealjasonduncan.com/hiring. You just fill out a form there. We will send that directly to your inbox. And through the process, you'll get an opportunity to have a free call with me to sit down how I can help you implement this into your business. It's a completely free resource, no strings attached. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/hiring. Thank you for being with me on this solo episode of The Root of All Success today. Please make sure you tune in again next week when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success, because that's what this show normally is about. Today's a little bit different. But thank you for listening. As always, I'm the Real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the Real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.